There are people who move quietly through the digital world. They scroll, observe, and absorb, yet leave no visible trace behind. No posts, no captions, no public opinions pinned to a profile. In a space designed for noise, their silence stands out. Not as emptiness, but as restraint. Not as absence, but as intention. Their quiet is often misunderstood, mistaken for shyness, disinterest, or invisibility. But beneath that silence lives a complex inner landscape shaped by awareness, caution, memory, and emotional intelligence. To understand them is to understand a deeper relationship with self, attention, and modern identity. Some people exist online the way a shadow exists in a room, always there, never demanding attention. They watch stories unfold without reacting. They read captions without responding. They know the rhythms of conversations they never join. In a world where visibility is treated like proof of existence, their presence feels unusual, almost unsettling. Not because they are absent, but because they refuse to perform their presence. Their silence becomes noticeable, precisely because everything else is loud. These individuals are often mistaken for being disengaged, or distant, or uninterested, but silence for them is rarely a lack of feeling. It is usually an overflow of awareness. They notice how quickly words are misunderstood, how easily moments are flattened into content, how emotions lose depth when translated into posts, so they stay still. Scrolling becomes a form of listening. Observing becomes a way of understanding people without interrupting them. And silence becomes a boundary, soft but intentional. There is something emotionally distinct about people who stay quiet online. They feel the weight of expression before releasing it. They sense how permanent a post can become, how a single sentence can be screenshotted, reshared, misread, or remembered longer than it was ever meant to exist. Where others feel excitement before posting, they feel pause, not because they are afraid of judgment, but because they understand it too well. They are often deeply reflective. Their thoughts arrive fully formed, layered with context, nuance, and contradiction. But social platforms rarely reward complexity. They reward clarity, confidence, certainty. Silence becomes the safer place for a mind that refuses to oversimplify itself. Their quiet is not emptiness. It is compression. Inside that silence lives humor never typed, grief never summarized, joy never experiences are allowed to remain whole, untouched by algorithms, untouched by applause. And yet, there is a subtle loneliness woven into this presence. They see others connect publicly. They witness affirmation unfold in real time, likes, comments, reactions acting as proof of being seen. And sometimes, a quiet question surfaces: is silence the same as being invisible? But even in that doubt, they remain still, because silence feels more honest than performance, more aligned than participation, more human than constant explanation. Their presence may not announce itself, but it is felt in every post they read carefully, in every moment they choose not to share, in every space where observation replaces exposure. This is not disengagement. This is a different way of being present. Silence rarely appears without a history. It is often learned long before social media existed, long before profiles, posts, or public timelines. For many who remain quiet online, silence was once a form of safety. In earlier environments, homes, classrooms, friendships, expression may not have been welcomed. Words may have been interrupted, dismissed, or misunderstood. Feelings may have been met with correction instead of curiosity. Over time, observation became easier than explanation, so they learned to listen first, to read rooms, to sense shifts in tone before speaking. Silence became a skill. Some grew up being emotionally perceptive too early. They noticed tension others ignored. They felt moods before they were named. Speaking required emotional labor, choosing the right words, managing reactions, softening truths. Remaining quiet felt lighter, more controlled. Others learned silence through exposure, moments where vulnerability was shared too openly, where honesty was met with judgment, laughter, or distance. Expression, once released, could not be taken back. Silence, however, could. Digital spaces magnify this memory. Social media doesn't forget. It archives. It preserves moments beyond their emotional expiration date. For a mind shaped by caution, this permanence feels heavy. They remember how quickly narratives form, how easily context disappears. A thought posted in one mood can be interpreted through another. Silence begins to feel like the only place where meaning remains intact. There is also the influence of emotional responsibility. Some people carry an instinctive awareness of impact. They know their words can shift moods, influence perceptions, alter dynamics. Posting is not neutral, it enters a shared emotional environment. Silence then becomes a way to avoid unnecessary disturbance. Not out of fear, out of consideration. In many cases, silence is inherited not genetically, but from caregivers who listened more than they spoke, from families where emotions were internalized rather than expressed, from cultures where restraint was valued over display. Expression was private. Processing was internal. Validation came from within, or from a very small circle. So when digital culture invites constant sharing, it feels unfamiliar, almost invasive, like being asked to externalize something that was never meant for public handling. This origin shapes how silence feels now. It doesn't feel like hiding. It feels like continuity, a familiar way of moving through the world, a rhythm established long before likes and comments existed. And while others learn how to be louder online, these individuals are simply being consistent with who they've always been. People who learned early that not everything needs to be said to be real. Silence, when viewed psychologically, is not the absence of expression. It is the presence of internal regulation. For people who remain quiet on social platforms, the mind often works differently around visibility. Expression is filtered through layers of evaluation. Is this accurate? Is this necessary? Will this still feel true tomorrow? These questions arise automatically, not as anxiety, but as cognitive awareness. Psychologists describe this as high self-concept clarity paired with strong emotional monitoring. Thoughts are not released impulsively. They are examined, held, refined, and often quietly set aside. There is also the role of social evaluation theory. Human brains are wired to anticipate judgment, but not all minds respond to it the same way. Some seek feedback to shape identity, others protect identity by limiting exposure. Silence becomes a way to preserve psychological coherence. Posting requires emotional translation. A lived experience must be reduced into words, images, or tone. For introspective individuals, this reduction feels incomplete. Something is always lost. So the mind resists sharing, not because it lacks confidence, but because it values wholeness. Neuroscience adds another layer. The brain processes social feedback, lights, comments, reactions, dopamine responds, patterns form. For some, this loop feels energizing. For others, it feels destabilizing. Silence protects against emotional dependency on unpredictable validation. Then there is cognitive load. Being visible requires maintenance. Replies must be managed. Interpretations must be considered. Misunderstandings must be clarified. For reflective minds already processing deeply, this added load feels unnecessary. Silence reduces mental noise. There is also an awareness of permanence. Once posted, content exists independently of intention. It can be revisited, reshaped, reinterpreted. For people who value emotional accuracy, this loss of control feels psychologically unsafe. So withholding becomes a form of self-trust. Belief that thoughts do not need external confirmation to exist, that emotions are valid even when unobserved, that presence does not require proof. Importantly, this silence is not isolation. Many silent users maintain rich inner worlds and meaningful offline connections. They simply do not equate expression with existence. From a psychological perspective, silence is not withdrawal, it is selectivity, a conscious choice to protect attention, emotional energy, and identity in a system designed to fragment all three. In this way, silence is not passive. It is active regulation, a mind choosing stability over stimulation. Even the quietest minds feel the pull of expression. Silence is rarely effortless. It is held. There is a subtle tension that lives beneath restraint, a space where thoughts gather, waiting. Unsent posts. Drafts never saved. Reactions felt but never shown. Silence, while intentional, still carries weight, because to stay quiet in a world of constant sharing is to exist slightly out of rhythm. They feel moments that almost escape them. A thought that feels important. A realization that wants acknowledgement. A fragment of truth that could connect. And for a brief second, expression feels close. Then hesitation arrives. Not fear, but awareness. They imagine the moment leaving their private understanding and entering public interpretation. They sense how quickly nuance dissolves, how tone can shift without warning, how meaning can slip out of their control, so they pause. Inside, two instincts meet. One wants to be seen not for attention, but for resonance. To know that something internal might land gently in another person's mind. To feel understood without explanation. The other instinct wants preservation. To keep experiences intact. To avoid dilution. To remain emotionally accurate. This conflict creates a quiet friction. Not dramatic. Not visible, but persistent. Silence begins to feel both safe and heavy. They witness others share freely. Emotions unfold publicly. Validation appears instantly. And there is a fleeting curiosity: what would it feel like to release something without overthinking it? But that curiosity often fades into restraint, because for them, expression is not light. It is meaningful, and meaning deserves protection. There is also resistance to performance. Many silent observers sense when authenticity becomes strategy, when vulnerability is shaped for engagement, when pain is edited into something digestible. They resist participating in that economy of emotion. Not out of judgment. Out of discomfort. They do not want to perform their inner world. They want to live it. Yet the tension remains. Silence can feel like integrity, but also like distance. Like self-respect, but also like invisibility. Like clarity, but also like being misunderstood. And so they live in this in-between space. Aware of connection. Protective of self. Their silence is not indecision. It is negotiation. A constant balancing of inner truth and outer exposure. A quiet effort to remain whole in a space that encourages fragmentation. This tension does not break them, but it shapes them. It teaches them to choose carefully, to speak only when alignment feels complete, to value depth over immediacy. And slowly, something shifts. At some point, the tension softens. Not because the desire to be seen disappears, but because understanding arrives quietly, without announcement. A realization that changes how silence feels. They begin to notice that their inner life does not shrink from being it deepens. Thoughts mature without interruption. Emotions complete their natural arc without being frozen into posts. Experiences are allowed to finish themselves. This is the moment when silence stops feeling like something they are holding. Backhand starts feeling like something they are choosing. They recognize that visibility is not the same as connection. That being witnessed does not always mean being understood, and that many forms of recognition are shallow by design. There is a clarity that arrives with this awareness. They see how quickly online expression can turn inward moments into outward performances, how meaning bends under metrics, how the self becomes something that must be explained, justified, reacted to, and they opt out. Not dramatically, not defiantly, simply, internally. They understand that not every thought needs an audience. Not every feeling needs confirmation. Some experiences are complete the moment they are fully felt. This realization does not isolate them. It grounds them. They start to see silence as alignment, a match between inner pace and outer behavior. Expression, when it happens, becomes rare and deliberate. Words carry weight again. Presence feels intentional. There is also a release from comparison without constant posting. Identity becomes less reactive, less shaped by how others respond. The self begins to exist without mirrors. Confidence grows quietly, not from praise, but from coherence. They stop measuring their relevance by visibility. They stop equating worth with response. And in that space, calm emerges. Silence no longer feels like absence. It feels like ownership. Ownership of attention. Ownership of emotion. Ownership of identity. They still care. They still observe. They still connect. But now, they do so without pressure to explain themselves to everyone. This is not retreat. It is refinement. A decision to live inwardly rich, even if outwardly unseen. And with that realization, a new relationship with the digital world begins to form. When performance is no longer required, something soft returns to the mind. Time stretches. Attention settles. Moments regain their original texture. People who remain silent online begin to experience life without the constant impulse to translate it. Joy is not filtered for relatability. Sadness is not shaped for empathy. Experiences are allowed to exist without becoming symbols. This creates a different kind of intimacy. Conversations become deeper because they are chosen. Relationships feel quieter but more sincere. Expression moves offline into tone, timing, presence. Connection is no longer measured by reaction, but by resonance. They begin to trust their inner compass. Without public feedback, self-worth stabilizes. Identity is no longer adjusted based on applause or silence. The mind rests from comparison. Emotional energy is conserved rather than scattered. Psychologically, this state supports integration. Thoughts are not fragmented across platforms. Feelings are processed fully, not paused for posting. Memory becomes personal, again not archived for others, but lived for self. There is also freedom in being unobserved. Mistakes can be made privately. Growth can happen without witnesses. Contradictions are allowed to coexist without explanation. The self is no longer something to curate, it is something to inhabit. This does not mean disconnection. Silent individuals still feel deeply connected to others, but the connection is selective, intentional. They listen carefully. They respond thoughtfully. Their presence feels grounding because it is undistracted. They become safe spaces not because they speak often, but because when they do, it matters. Living without performance also reshapes how they consume content. They engage without envy. They appreciate without comparison. They observe patterns instead of participating in cycles. This distance creates clarity. They see how attention is traded, how emotion is incentivized, how identity can become transactional, and they remain outside of it not out of superiority, but self-preservation. Silence, in this way, becomes a lifestyle. A rhythm, a quiet agreement with the self. To exist without constant display is not to disappear. It is to exist privately, fully, and with integrity. And in that privacy, something rare is protected. A sense of wholeness that does not require witnesses. In a world built on noise, silence often goes unnoticed. But it is always felt. The people who stay quiet online move through digital spaces like steady currents beneath the surface. They do not announce themselves, yet they influence atmosphere simply by how they pay attention. Their presence is calm, unhurried, grounded. They remind the world quietly that not everything meaningful needs to be displayed. Their silence holds listening. It holds discernment. It holds a refusal to flatten the human experience into something easily consumed. While platforms reward immediacy, they choose patience. While visibility is praised, they choose privacy. And in doing so, they preserve something fragile: depth. These individuals often see more than they share. They notice patterns others rush past. They sense emotional undercurrents beneath curated surfaces. Their understanding is shaped by observation, not performance. And this understanding changes how they relate to others. They become witnesses rather than participants, spaces where others feel seen without being evaluated, listeners in a culture obsessed with speaking. Their silence is not a void. It is a container. It holds thoughts long enough to mature, emotions long enough to settle, moments long enough to remain human. In time, this quiet presence becomes a kind of wisdom, not the kind that instructs or corrects, but the kind that exists. Steady and unobtrusive, The world does not always notice them, but the world is shaped by them, because silence, when chosen, is not withdrawal. It is restraint, it is care, it is awareness, and, perhaps, in a digital age that rarely slows down, the most radical act is not to speak louder, but to listen longer, to remain present without needing proof, to exist without constant reflection, to be whole without being seen. In that stillness, something deeply human endures.